Hi, so I'm Alex. I am the clinical lead occupational therapist for learning disability and autism inpatient services.
I'm Rebecca Griffiths and I'm regional lead occupational therapist in the Midlands, and I support occupational therapists within learning disability hospitals.
Thank you very much for joining us today. What we wanted to do is have a bit of a chat about your service line and about the chapter you've written in our exciting new book. So to start with, I wonder if you could just explain to people a little bit about what that service line looks like, who's in there and maybe what their typical journey is for a patient that's in the learning disability services.
Yeah. So we've got a number of services throughout England and a couple up in Scotland as well. So we're scattered around. Generally, people come to us with a primary diagnosis of a learning disability and or autism, and usually some other complex health needs as well. So it might be another a mental health diagnosis. It might be that they've come because they're demonstrating behaviours of distress that can challenge services. It might be that they have a forensic history or background as well. And it can be that they come down to us through higher secure kind of hospital setting, or it might be that they need a bit of extra support and they've come up in through a community setting for that extra support, so we can support them to get back out into the community and live the life that they want to live.
Yeah, I think just touching on that, during COVID and post-pandemic, a lot of the admissions, I think that changed a bit, didn't it? We saw a lot of community placement breakdowns because the services were struggling, and seeing that we didn't used to see so many people coming from the community into services. It was more kind of coming down from security levels, but a lot more of them people who have spent their whole life like living in the community and then having to adapt to supporting them within a hospital setting, which might be their first sort of experience of doing that.
So there's definitely been a change in face of those services in recent years, haven't there? And thinking about the differences between people being in hospital, being in their own homes, and how we get that balance right for that patient group. What's the challenge there for an occupational therapist? What are the things that we're really focusing on and that might be tricky?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things, obviously a big push within learning disability and autism services is that you start looking at discharge from admission, essentially. The idea is for that person not to be in a hospital setting for any longer than they need to be. And I think that can be a challenge in itself, because obviously it's nice to get to know the people that you're working with, find out what their hopes and dreams and aspirations are. And I think sometimes you get to a point where they're ready for discharge before you've kind of been able to do everything that maybe as an occupational therapist you'd like to do with somebody. And I think sometimes it's a challenge for me. I don't know if you experience it as well, Becky, but you've not always got an OT in the community to necessarily hand that over to.
So if you can see the things that need to be done, but it's trying to see if the resources out there to support them on that next step, isn't it?
And that's the thing, obviously, when you can try and obviously hand that over to whichever teams are supporting them in a community setting as much as possible, but once they're out in the community, that's it. Then you don't really get to do any further work with that person to see if they kind of reach those aspirations that you've talked about with them. And it's a challenge, but at the same time, obviously, it's a positive that they're no longer in hospital. So it's nice from that respect as well.
I think learning more about how we change our hospital environments for people. Hospitals look the way they do and they feel the way they do. I think Cygnet's always done really well at trying to create a more homely environment for an inpatient setting, but we're trying to kind of go that next level now, knowing that you've got people who have come from sort of the comfort of their own home and wanting to make them adaptations to make it that bit more personable. So we support people with if they want to decorate their own bedroom, they decorate it, putting up pictures, photos. we've done something recently, an exercise in sensory mapping, where we've created hotspots for loud noises and kind of displaying that map so that individuals in the service can identify places where they can go that's a bit quieter, or if they like it noisier, they can go to that space.
And what impact have you seen from that, Becky? What's the outcome of sharing that awareness across the team and having those dedicated spaces?
I think the biggest thing was people not even, day to day not recognising things like strong smells that come from the kitchen, and where that might hit certain parts of the service, and, recognising that thoroughfares are always going to be a bit busier, and, the way out to the garden's going to be busy. And I think it helped people kind of recognise that and be a bit more aware of it. We have it displayed in reception, so when we have visitors come as well, if they have any sensory preferences and things, that they can highlight the spaces where they might not feel as comfortable as well, because we obviously have, everybody has their own sensory profiles, and we all experience those different tolerances of noises and things. But we also have people for CTR panels, etc., like experts by experience, who have got their own, conditions that they're managing, and it helps, to put that information out there. So yeah, I guess it's highlighted as well that we need more quiet spaces. I think that when we looked at the map as a whole, we were like, wow, there's a lot of busy, which some people absolutely need, but
so that's the
quiet
next thing to work
on,
isn't
and
it?
I hope to change the map over time, where we've got more very secure, quieter spaces for people.
It sounds like it's really raised awareness in the staff teams though, and really highlighted that everybody has those preferences, and the more people we've got aware of that has to be a good thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Definitely. And I think that's a really great piece of work that's been done, actually, in terms of how we then share that across the service line, and how we filter that into our kind of sensory pathway, as it were. And I think, like you were just saying, Becky, obviously lack of quiet space can be quite a big issue for quite a lot of sites, and it is how we use the kind of the drivers that are out there at the minute in terms of autism friendly environments and sensory friendly environments, and how we can kind of push that forward a bit more within the service line. And that is hopefully something over the next year that we're going to try and improve a little bit further, and work on developing a little bit more. So
that's going to be the focus for the service line as a whole, as part of your service development plan, to work through that.
Yeah, to get that pathway kind of really firmed up, and to kind of benchmark it as well a little bit against other services, and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do for the people that we support.
So thinking about those projects that are happening, and you've spent recent years refining the model that's used in the services, haven't you? When you started writing the chapter for the book, what were the things that you needed to think about, and how did people get involved in different ways? We don't want to give away everything that's in your chapter, but it might be nice just to touch on some of the things that are included in there.
Yeah, we do talk about obviously the national drivers and the guidance and things that can obviously drive what we do. We've also obviously got a few case studies within the chapter as well. So I will say we had really good input from quite a lot of OTs within the service line. So where people had a really keen interest in getting involved and they really wanted to focus on a specific area, then that was their kind of part of the chapter that they did. So yeah, we've got some really passionate OTs within the service line that really did get involved with it. So yeah, it kind of gives you a bit of a flavour of maybe kind of a day in the life of what an OT within a learning disability and autism setting might look like, kind of what our role within those services can be. And again,
as much as you can ever have a typical day, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. No one day. I think that's probably, as I always say, the reason probably why I've been in this service line for so long is because no one day is the same, and it's all different. But yeah, I think it gives you a flavour of that anyway. And the 3 case studies are generally, there's similarities, but they're generally kind of different in terms of the individual's needs and things, to hopefully give people a kind of broad idea of the scope. And then we do talk a bit about challenges, and obviously really important one is working alongside families and carers as well, which is definitely a big thing within any service, but particularly if you're working in a service where maybe the individuals that you work with do lack capacity and they're not able to maybe communicate their wants and needs in the same way. You work really closely with families and carers to support that.
How do we ensure that we're getting that bit right and that we've got that appropriate input that's best for that person?
I mean, I would always, and I think both me and Becky are quite big advocates for it, is obviously it's the person first. And I think, again, one of the things that we're trying to look at, making sure our pathway and the assessments that we use, we're looking at making sure that they're accessible to the people that we work with. So whether that's needing it in 4 different formats, potentially, to meet individuals' needs and adapting those and working closely with our, obviously, speech and language therapy colleagues to make those personalised for that person, to try and get as much of that information across from their perspective as we can. And then, so we'll obviously look at it from that perspective. And then if they're happy, usually we have an easy read consent form as well, don't we? And we'll obviously tell people about what OT is, and within that we ask, are they happy for us to talk to family and friends? Is there any one particular person or a couple of particular people they'd like us to speak to? And if they're happy with that, then we would obviously approach those particular family members and work closely with them.
I think, again, as I've mentioned before, some of the kind of barriers we've had to overcome, particularly following the pandemic, was that contact and that distance, and adapting how we support people to maintain those family relationships. So, things like Zoom and getting accounts for people to be able to contact via, those platforms has been different. That's not something that we have ever done before.
But a whole new skill set for people, isn't it? And a lot of support that's needed.
And some of the individuals obviously have their own phones and iPads, and supporting them to make sure that they've got the resources that they need. And like you say, they can use it themselves. And then as teams, sort of those who need that extra support to actually facilitate it alongside the staff. That was new, but I think it's been really, really good for maintaining those links and relationships, because they can maintain contact more frequently than previously for face-to-face visits. So, I think that's been a positive thing.
And the biggest challenge for OTs in that service? What's the one thing that maybe time and time again you get together as a group and feel that's the most difficult part of your role? What would you say?
Delayed discharges.
Yeah, that is a big one.
Yeah. So lots of individuals of no fault of anyone. The social care provisions in the community, there's not that resource is really small. So we have lots of individuals who are spending more time than we'd ideally like within a hospital setting, because those environments in the community are maybe not available or ready yet for them. And it's kind of maintaining that motivation. And I was talking to one of my colleagues yesterday. It's just like, this guy's been here for 5 years. How do we keep him interested in what we're doing? Because he's like, well, I've done that group before, like 4 times over. How, and trying to adapt how we do things for people. I'd say that things have become more kind of, we've always been person focused, as clinicians anyway, but doing things more on those one-to-one basis and working with individuals in that way, because a lot of them have done sort of your group models. It's, I've done it before, and then adapting the activities to be that kind of bit more quality of life, leisure focus. So it might not be necessarily, they might have done their treatment and they just need to have a comfortable experience while they're with us.
So it's trying to replicate, really, isn't it, what would happen in the community?
Absolutely.
But while still fitting that in with
Yeah.
other
The
people that are in
model.
the service,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, it can be, because it's a different dynamic, I suppose. It might be that for some people they're not necessarily they're at the end of that kind of journey, I suppose, and they're waiting for that next step, whereas you've got people at the beginning of that, and kind of meeting the needs across that journey can sometimes be a challenge. But yeah, I'd definitely say it's like anybody else would if they were living out in the community. You do the things that you want to do, that you need to do, that you enjoy doing, that make you feel good and happy. And it's just to try and, I think our role within that becomes maybe not so direct, but more indirect in terms of how we make sure that the environment supports that as much as possible.
And ultimately, that's our role as OTs, isn't it? To get them to that point where, as independently as possible, they are identifying and engaging in things that are of interest to each individual.
I always think that I feel kind of content and happy when an individual doesn't need me so much. You know, when they're not coming and saying, "Oh, I need to see Becky and I need to do this," and you know, when I'm kind of like, actually, I can take that step back now. I'm like, yes, we're there.
So that probably leads us on then to what the most rewarding part of your job is. If you think about particularly working in those services, what's the thing that stands out as most rewarding?
I mean, I definitely say that is also one of my highlights. I did have somebody say to me the other day, actually, I don't have any occupational therapy needs. I can do everything that I need to do and that I want to do. And it was just, again, that they felt empowered to be able to say that and to be able to say, actually, no, I'm happy with where I'm at. This is, I've made that choice myself.
And I think also thinking about if just the fact that someone is able to identify what an occupational therapy need might be
exactly.
tells you a lot about the culture of that service and the way that you're all working, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that was I think that's what I took away from it, Emma, really, was the highlight, that you've actually been able to tell me what your OT needs were, and that actually now you're at a point in your life where you don't feel like you have any. So yeah, it was really nice. Other things, I mean, just little things sometimes. I'm just sitting with somebody and just chatting, and I'm actually just going away and saying thank you for your time, thank you for listening, because a lot of people are somewhere that they don't really want to be. They don't choose to always be there, and actually having somebody to just sit and listen to you and to feel like somebody cares is a really big thing. And actually somebody just saying thank you, I really appreciate that. That, if anything, means a lot to me.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We're all busy in all different roles, in all different services, but knowing that you have got the time to take out to not necessarily, it's not always completing an intervention or an assessment, and just having 10 minutes to sit down and have a cup of tea with somebody is really valuable, isn't it?
It's treating the person as a person rather than a process, essentially. Yes, we have a process to follow, but it's about obviously us not using that as it's not a tick box exercise, essentially. It's the person comes first and what they want and need. So
So before we wrap things up today, thinking about people who might be listening who are interested in working in learning disability hospitals, maybe newly qualified OTs or someone who's fancying a change of pace, what advice would you give them?
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think we probably were examples of two people that have been within an autism
for
service
a long time now.
But have both done other things beforehand,
absolutely.
haven't you?
Yeah. I always joke that I kind of created my own rotation when I first started with the company, and I'd gone, I'd spent time in CAMS, male mental health, setting up and supporting with some of the community step down, certain different things, and learning disability settings is the one that's, it's kept me. I think there's just something.
It's where your passion is.
Yeah, and there's just something really, really rewarding, and I think it's a privilege really being able to have the opportunity to make those small change. I think some of the just briefly back on rewards, it is making those little changes to people's lives, like being able to influence what their future property looks like, to make sure this is where they're going to stay and they're not going to come back into service. And then hearing feedback like a year later that person's still doing really well. Like, you kind of, sometimes it's not that really visible stuff, it's the kind of invisible things in the background that you get that, yes, we're doing it.
It's when you get to advocate for them, isn't it? And actually you see that come to kind of fruition. It's really nice.
I think, like I say, there's lots of, I guess, going back, like you say, to the why do this role. There's lots of difficulties for individuals who have got learning disability diagnoses, and we can't hide from the fact that it's a population within society that still have some sort of disadvantages, I guess, socially, and just being, like you say, that advocate and being able to support that group of people to have better lives is really
a long way to
important.
go with the equity side of things, haven't we, and making sure that equity is there for people with learning disabilities and for autistic people as well. But it's nice to be part of that and to make those changes, kind of not just within our services but kind of nationally as well, and to kind of push that forward and drive the change, really.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about those services and what makes them stand out from an OT perspective?
I was going to say something that I've always kind of valued within Cygnet is the opportunities that we get to be innovative and drive change and make changes. I mean, Alex is involved in lots of different projects. I'm involved in different projects, and the trust from people like yourselves, Emma, to be able to kind of go into those projects. So it's something that I'm working on at the moment that came from sort of based on that, some of that equality and trying to close the gap. We know that like employment rates for people with learning disabilities are extremely low, and something I'm really passionate about is that if somebody wants to work, we should be making changes and adaptations and adjustments to allow that person, as reasonably as possible to have some sort of meaningful, fulfilling work role, whether that's with us currently or beyond a hospital setting. So I'm currently working on developing a vocational pathway which gives tools and resources to people at different stages of their kind of work career journey. It's really nice being able to have that opportunity, and hopefully we'll have a few other individuals in our different sort of services that can, the long-term aim is that they've got the skills through these sort of domains to be able to gain paid employment post sort of admissions into services. And
I think that ties really nicely, doesn't it, with thinking back to the conversation we were having about these delayed discharges and, people are feeling ready to move on. It's something else where you can really support what that community is going to look like, isn't it? And start those transitions even earlier to try and make sure that we get that right.
It's giving that hope. A lot of the individuals, I guess where some of this came from was a lot of the individuals would say, well, there's no point in me even talking about work because that's not an option for me. Like, I'll just, have to leave hospital and I'll be on benefits and I'm like, well, no, like we can change that, like, and I've got guys who are saying they want, loads of different careers and different things that they're wanting to do, and I'm like, why not? Even if it's 5 hours a week and that works for you, let's try and, get to that point.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really interesting, and hopefully it's given people watching or listening a little bit of insight into what it's like in those services, maybe made them want to dive in and read a little bit more in the book. So it's been really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.